I am excited that you're here. I'm excited about Khanmigo. I'm excited because, well, for a number of reasons. Again, I know technology can sometimes be a little bit scary, right? Like, oh my gosh, where's this going? What are we going to do? How's this going to work out? But at the same time, there are opportunities for it to really give you a boost in your classrooms. And there's a lot of products out there. Like I don't want to put this to the Khanmigo folks. I told Jason recently, like, I think I probably get like 2 or 3 calls a week from vendors who are selling a variety of products, really. And truthfully, they just feel like output machines. You know, it's like just having a chat GPT engine, but they put a nice pretty interface on it, as opposed to this is a platform that is interactive, right? And the writing coach is one of my favorite elements that you guys are going to be dealing with today. Because the number one, one of the things that you always hear people say, like, well, the kids are just going to be cheating. Well, actually, we've kind of solved some of that, haven't we, as you learn how some of this works. And so you can get the best of both worlds. You can harness the power of AI, but also allow kids to learn and stuff like that, but not have the whole, like, well, they're just using it to cheat and these kids aren't going to be able to write or anything else like that. So I really appreciate the fact that you all are willing to come here and to learn about this. Enjoy your time. I know you're in good hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me. As they said, I'm a principal product manager at Khan Academy. So I'm very excited to be with you all. I'm a former teacher. A little bit about me. I taught middle school, ELA, and humanities in Roxbury in Boston. I did some curriculum writing. I did some teacher training. I got my master's in education from Boston University. And after that, when I left the classroom, I co-founded another company called commonlit.org. Any Commonlit users in here? And then after that, I joined Khan Academy, where I have been focused on developing literacy resources for Khan, specifically with Khanmigo. So when I was a teacher in Boston, I taught a variety of subjects. I taught reading. I taught a little bit of U.S. history when somebody went on maternity leave. And I taught writing. And writing was, by and far, the hardest subject that I had to teach. And I spent at least 10 hours a day just teaching, working, grading, planning, and then weekends, and it was exhausting. And it definitely was one of the reasons why when I left the classroom, I felt a sense of relief, because teaching writing was impossible. It just felt really impossible. I'd go back to teaching reading. Reading was lovely, but even reading involves writing as well. And whenever you assign an essay, anybody who's taught writing before, whether it be in a history class, a science class, an ELA class, you know the time it takes to provide feedback to students. So when I came to Khan Academy, one of the things that we wanted to do was to try and figure out a solution to that specific problem. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about why we built Writing Coach at Khan Academy. And we're also going to be talking about how we designed it specifically for an instructional purpose, which is a little bit different from some other tools out there. And then we're going to teach you how to assign a Writing Coach essay, and we're going to show you what the student experience is like and the teacher reporting as well. And you all are going to get some time to play with it and experiment with it on your own. Can anybody tell me how much time the National Commission on Writing expects students to write regularly? Like, what's the time expectation for student writing from the National Commission on Writing? 60 minutes a day, which is a lot. And I don't know about you, but I rarely see that. When I do go into classrooms, that's pretty rare. So I heard many of these things mentioned. 60 minutes of writing practice per day is what's recommended for students in middle and high school. They need direct instruction in everything from audience and purpose and tone to how to conduct research and incorporate evidence. They need exposure to mentor text. They need somebody to model good writing for them. They need strong vocabulary and practice with vocabulary. They need feedback that is specific and actionable and delivered in a timely manner. And reading is a big part of that too, reading comprehension skills. And they also need motivation. They need to kind of care about it and want to do the task in order to do it well. Now let's do this one out loud. What are some of the things that make teaching writing particularly hard? Yeah.
Time.
Tell me more about that.
Well, if we're talking about 60 minutes per day, balancing that against all the other core skills that you're trying to build in regular practice with, it's challenging. It's almost unsustainable.
Yeah. And I think the 60 minutes per day doesn't necessarily mean 60 minutes of sustained writing per day. It might be like 10 minutes in science class, 20 minutes in history class, and you spread it out across the various subjects. I saw another hand. Yep.
There's one of me, and there's 20 of them, per class. So getting around the room to, like, the management of teaching writing, right? I have kids over here who need a lot more help, and I've got kids who are goofing off, and I've got kids who are just stuck. So one of the biggest challenges that makes it difficult is meeting the needs of all the different kids at the same time.
And you're talking about the writing process itself, not even just once they turn in their drafts, the effort required for one teacher with however many students total to give the feedback on all those essays. Yes?
The accessibility to plagiarism.
Yes, absolutely. Can you talk more about that?
I'm sorry.
Can you share more about your experience with that?
We as a department, we've had a diagnostic so that we have a basis, and we can see the drastic difference in language. That it's like a red flag, but it's the time it takes away to investigate.
Right.
Is this fairly being marked as plagiarism or not? And it disrupts the whole learning process, and I keep preaching the philosophy. This is the place to make the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
This is normal.
Mm-hmm.
Part of writing process is the mess.
Yep.
Before you get to clarity.
How many of you have experienced something similar with students using AI purportedly using AI for that purpose? Okay. I met a teacher in Indiana who said that she was using Google Draft History, Draft Back, to look at like almost every student's draft to check that they were. She even had to make her outline so specific that she could compare exactly what was drafted to the outline she specified so that she could make sure that it wasn't ChatGPT. And she said this added, in addition to the already really hard work of being a teacher, this added extra time to her day. So I spend a lot of my time talking to and learning from ELA teachers specifically. And again, writing is one of the hardest jobs when it comes to teaching. These are some quotes on the left from interviews that we've done recently with ELA teachers before we developed Writing Coach and during that process. And on the right are some screenshots of recent comments in various ELA teacher Facebook groups that I'm still in that I just wanted to show because it's such a range of challenges in a writing classroom. You have the struggle of just teaching writing itself. That alone is very hard. How do you teach students to write well without it being way too formulaic? You want to encourage voice, but it's got to be academic. And then on top of that, you have students who are below grade level typically, and getting those minutes in every day is really hard. Getting the feedback to students in a timely manner is very hard. Supporting them through the entire writing process is hard. And then you have AI on top of that. Teachers are exhausted. It is a struggle. And then in 2025, we had, now that it's 2025, we now have to contend with ChatGPT and DeepSeek and all these other variety of AI platforms where students can turn to have AI do the work for them. I was in another classroom once where the students were using the Snapchat AI feature to do their writing for them. So they'll find all kind of creative ways. Another quick turn and talk. I want to touch upon another question that I hear come up sometimes. And I led a workshop with a high school, just with a group of students in a high school about a year ago. And one of those students said to me, I just don't see the point in learning to write anymore because AI can do it for me. Why do I even need to learn this anymore? So I want you to talk amongst your table. What would you say to that student? In this age where we have large language models, where AI can produce writing that can pass for human, why is it still important to learn writing skills? If you think it's still important, I hope you do. Go ahead. I would love to hear some of the reasons shared at your table. Do you agree with that student or not, and why? Over here.
Well, to get to 1984, but writing is thought. Language is thought. any way that you reduce language, whether into a large language model or just the reduction of even being able to break down your ideas and set critical thinking, you're losing your own freedom of thinking and expression.
Completely agree. Can everybody hear the other sides? Okay. Repeat it? Okay. So what she had said was that writing is thinking and thought, and so if you remove the process of learning to write, then that's a detriment to students who are also using writing as a way of thinking. What else? I heard some people talk about, well, you need to be able to write something to the AI to prompt it to do what you want it to do. That's true. Yes?
Yeah. I mean, we also talked about good uses for AI. So for instance, if I have kids writing a creative writing assignment and like, you know, some kids may not consider themselves particularly creative, hey, have AI generate a prompt for you rather than writing the entire thing. Now at the end of the day, we're still there to help support you through the writing process. Mm-hmm. Just because you think you're not good at writing doesn't mean you can't not be good at it. You can always be good at something. Just how you put your mindset towards it.
Agreed. So that was teaching students about kind of more ethical, responsible ways of using AIs, for example, with creative writing, asking it to give you a prompt to help spark your creativity. So in these past couple of AI-crazed years, I often return to this quote from Joan Didion, in which she says, "I write entirely to find out what I am thinking, what I am looking at, what I see, and what it means." And so to go back to what you said over here, the process of writing is a process of learning and thinking critical in and of itself. There's also, on top of that, just a robust body of evidence that shows that real cognitive and psychological benefits come from the process of writing too. Students use writing as a way to process what they think about things, what they feel about things, to work through things, to develop how they even believe, like what their argument is. Just sitting, if you've ever sat down and written something, oftentimes you come out on the other end thinking something different, just from the process of having to put your thoughts on paper and organize them. So, no, I do not personally see large language models as a reason not to teach writing anymore. Did anybody agree with the student, by the way, out of curiosity? We don't need to teach writing anymore? Wonderful. Okay, great. I'm in the right room. So if anything, I think it's actually more important maybe now than it ever has been. Because it's such a thinking as a human is such a deeply human thing, and writing is such a big part of that. But it is critical, I think, to your point, to educate students about AI and large language models, how they work, how to use them ethically and responsibly in a classroom. And we could do an entire symposium on this topic alone, but I did include some thoughts here to consider when you're incorporating AI in the classroom. So one of the first things I think about, and as you're thinking about these things, consider other AI tools too. How many of those tools are these things true for? So will the AI actually help students learn, or is it more of a shortcut? Will students become reliant on the AI? If it's being used as scaffolding, is there a way that we can gradually remove that scaffolding? Do students actually understand how large language models work and how that content is generated, and when not to trust the content that is being generated? And are they actually using AI in ways that encourage higher order thinking skills versus kind of put that on the AI itself? So these are the questions that I think are important when we are trying to figure out, should we be using this AI in the classroom? So with all of that, let's talk about Writing Coach, how Writing Coach came to be, why it is different from other tools. We went over a little bit of this before, but some people think Khan Academy and they think test prep or math and science content, right? It's rarely kind of seen as the ELA resource or the tool for teaching writing. But our mission at Khan Academy has always been about providing a world-class education to anyone, anywhere. So that has always included the humanities. I think we've always just been trying to figure out, how do we break into the humanities? How do we support teachers with that particularly? So when we started exploring AI solutions back in 2022, one of the things that immediately came to mind was, this is really good with writing related tasks for obvious reasons. It's a large language model. And so we were exploring what are some of the problems that we could solve with this new technology. And as a former writing teacher, I knew that the problems with teaching writing were some of the hardest to solve problems out there. And this is because students have to meet grade level standards. They're supposed to be practicing 60 minutes a day, apparently. Many students need support through the entire writing process, not just getting that feedback piece, and then delivering that feedback in a way that's timely and specific and actionable is a big job. So in reality, what we often see in writing classrooms is that about a quarter of students actually end up meeting grade level writing standards in middle and high school. A tiny percentage of students are actually getting 60 minutes of writing practice per day. And because ELA secondary teachers, middle and high school teachers tend to have 100 or more students often, that means that for a teacher to deliver timely, specific, actionable feedback to all of their students, if I have 100 students and I limit myself to 10 minutes of feedback per essay, which I would literally do, I would set my phone timer and be like, I'm stopping after 10 minutes for each one. That's 17 hours for one draft of one essay assignment to get feedback to all of my students. And we're supposed to be assigning 60 minutes of writing per day. It seemed at the time to be kind of an intractable problem. But we decided to try and tackle it with AI. And last fall, in September, we launched what ultimately is now the Khanmigo writing coach experience. It started off as a prototype that we built. We did a feedback activity. We did a college admissions essay activity that's still available on Khanmigo too. And then this past fall is when we launched the full writing coach experience. So I wanted to go over, because again, there's many AI tools out there, as the commissioner mentioned. He's getting a lot of phone calls about all these different tools. And I think you're definitely familiar with ChatGPT. It has its uses, but it's also always more than happy to write a student's entire essay for them. And so there's positive use cases for all of these tools, but the primary purpose behind them is it's either to save time for the student or the teacher, or it's to produce better writing. And with Writing Coach, the purpose is to produce better writers. And so here's how Writing Coach is different. Writing Coach is an instructional tool with the primary purpose of student learning and teacher transparency. It's designed to guide students through the entire process of writing, from the very beginning of getting that essay prompt, through outlining, drafting, getting feedback, revising, submitting to the teacher. It's also a way for teachers to get more writing practice in the classroom and real-time support for students. And then it also includes data dashboards for teachers with at-a-glance, high-level insights at the class level, and then in-depth insights into the actual student writing processes. So it is not a digital essay writing platform. It's not Google Docs, right? It's not an evaluative tool or a grading tool. We're not going to just spit out scores for every kid. It isn't a student productivity tool like Grammarly, where they can just accept the suggestions. It doesn't just generate feedback, although it does do that. And it doesn't focus on grammar and mechanics and kind of let students just accept those suggestions. So we launched Writing Coach, and some of the feedback that we've gotten so far has been related to the quality of the feedback. I think this was one of the things that initially really set it apart from some of those other tools. When we developed Writing Coach, we were a little bit obsessive about the quality of the feedback. I think because it was built by a team of former writing teachers and tutors, we're not going to settle for anything that wasn't better than, what a student teacher would be able to do, right? And so we ended up creating multiple AI prompts to focus on various parts of the writing process, as well as various feedback prompts for different feedback categories. And we meticulously tested and refined these over the course of over a year, and we're still doing this, to make sure that the feedback is targeted, it's aligned to what grade level expectations are, and it's actually actionable, and not just, oh, you did good on this, and maybe you should work on your organization. It helps the student through the process of understanding what's wrong. So that was one piece of feedback we got, is that the feedback from Khanmigo is really excellent. And the other piece is that it has helped actually improve student writing. So students who are using Writing Coach, we had one teacher in Florida, I think, who used it very often last fall, and every single one, or she was part of a pilot that we did actually last spring, and every single one of her students in her class passed the state test. And we think that this is because it's an instructional tool and it puts the onus on the student to have to do all of the thinking themselves, all of the work themselves. We think that that is where it holds its most promise. So the first thing to do when working with Writing Coach is to create the assignment. And to create the Writing Coach assignment, you would start by logging into Khan Academy and clicking on the khanmigo dropdown. Can you raise your hand if you are familiar with the Khan Academy website and that khanmigo dropdown? Okay, if not, once you log in, you should all have this dropdown. So a Writing Coach assignment, when you click that assign button, let me go back to just show you where that assign button is. Once you click on Writing Coach, you should see an assign button that's blue in the top right corner. And every Writing Coach assignment starts with a prompt. You provide the prompt. The teacher provides the prompt to the student, and you can use any academic essay prompt that you want. A few things to note about how Writing Coach was designed. It was designed for secondary humanities classrooms. So we typically say grades 7 and up, 7 through 12. However, if you can put 5th, 6th graders on it, it might just be a little bit advanced for them. It struggles a little bit to kind of bring that level down, and it's trained on, we've tweaked it and made it work for middle and high school essays starting around grade 7. So those are the grade levels we officially support, but again, you can use it for 5th and 6th grade. The 3 essay types that we officially support, right now we're going to be adding more, are persuasive argumentative, expository explanatory, and literary analysis. And so what I recommend, if you are planning on using Writing Coach for general writing practice, those are very good ways to kind of select the kind of writing that you want students to do. But if you're using it for something like SAT essay prep or the middle school essay prep, choose the closest one to what the prompt is. So in some cases that's going to be literary analysis. Usually it's argumentative persuasive. So just give your best guess as to the essay type that it is. And what is really important about the essay instructions is that you are as specific as possible. In every stage of Writing Coach, khanmigo is going to look at the instructions that you provided, and it's going to be a stickler for the student about those instructions. So if you say, write an essay about whatever, it's not going to push the student to include textual evidence or a certain amount of textual evidence, or even maybe the student will give examples but not actually textual evidence. So if you want students to include at least 3 pieces of textual evidence, say that. So be really explicit about what you want them to do. If you want them to include a concession rebuttal or counter-argument paragraph, say so. If you want students to cite their evidence in a specific format, say which one. You can even tell it exactly what rubric that you're going to use. We don't have a feature yet where you can upload the rubric, but all you have to do is say, what I would actually recommend is, this is from the New Hampshire SAS rubric for middle school. You can literally take the entire section from all of the score 4s and put that into the essay instructions. Say this essay should meet these expectations. And khanmigo will check the student's essay to make sure it's meeting those expectations. For SAT, similarly, you can take the same text here and plop that into the essay instructions, and it's going to pay attention to what you want. You can also just say this is an SAT practice test for the essay, and because it's in a large language model, it's going to know what that means, and it's going to know generally what the expectations are for that. So if you're in a hurry, you can just say this is an SAT essay practice test, and it will kind of have those expectations in mind. Another word about these SAS and SAT tests. Some of them, or I think most of them actually, require that students read a reading passage. For SAT, because they're typically pretty short, you can actually paste the reading passage, like the entire prompt, directly into essay instructions, into that field there. If it's a well-known text, you don't even really have to do that. It just sort of will be aware of the text that is being referenced. If it is longer, you also don't really need to include it at all. It might. I looked at one. In this case, it says, explain how Paul Bogard builds an argument to persuade his audience. You don't need to put in the actual reading passage here. you can just let students do the reading part outside of Writing Coach, and then Writing Coach will push them to include evidence to make sure the evidence is aligned. But if it's a not super well-known passage or it's too long to include in the essay instructions itself, khanmigo won't necessarily be able to say, oh, that evidence is not actually from that text, or it might not be able to, to verify that it is a real piece of evidence if it's not from a well-known text or if you don't provide the text. Does that make sense? Yes.
Sorry, you said, is there a limit to how much text you can put into the prompt?
I believe there is not.
Okay.
I just checked this.
Like if they're doing a rhetorical analysis of a speech,
Yes.
for example, and let's say the speech is like 3 pages, would it be able to fit that whole speech in?
You could. I'm pretty sure you could. The one caveat is sometimes large language models have this thing called a context window.
Yeah.
And if it's too long, if you put way too much information in there, it might get confused
Sure.
and it might not work as well.
Okay.
So if it's a speech that's well known, you can just reference the name of the
Yeah.
speech and that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
If it's like a random article from some, random publication that is maybe not super Googleable and it's short, you might want to include it, but otherwise I probably wouldn't include
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Yeah. Another point about the reading passages. So if you are going to be using this for test prep, I would have students start by reading the passages on paper or wherever you want them to read them in class. We do not have anything in Writing Coach that will do the reading with students. We're thinking about it. We're exploring a reading coach. But for now, have them do the reading passages before they start the essay. Okay? Once they get in to their accounts, students will, again, log into their accounts, whether they get there through Clever or ClassLink, whatever it is that you guys use, log into their account. They will see their assignment right on their assignments page, but they can also do the same thing that you did, go to their khanmigo learner activities, go to Writing Coach, and they'll see it there too. But it's listed under their assignment, so they should see it there. What Writing Coach does for students, and I'll show you what this looks like in a minute, is it starts by breaking down the prompt with understanding the assignment. It helps them formulate the outline. It helps them get started on a draft. And then it helps them with feedback and revising. So for understanding the assignment, if you look up here, I know there's multiple screens. We have understanding, outlining, drafting, and revising. So if your teachers are doing writing coach in class, you can walk around, you can see what stage they're in. But there's also a dashboard for teachers that I'll show you shortly that also tells you exactly what stage each student is working on. So you can get a sense of how far in the assignment students are. In this first stage, understanding, khanmigo is looking at the prompt that you gave, it's looking at the information you provided, and it's engaging the student in a conversation about the assignment. It gives a couple of initial prompts. Do you want me to explain the essay type? Do you want to know what the requirements are? Do you want me to summarize them? Do you have questions? So students can use this as an opportunity to ask about, defining terms. What is a rebuttal again? Like, can you remind me how I cite in-text and citations for MLA? Or can you kind of tell me what I should do now, right? And sometimes khanmigo will ask the student, have you done the readings yet? If not, go to the readings. Here's what you should be looking for. And it's an opportunity for the student to kind of ask any questions they need, feel safe, feel like they can, share their confusion with the AI and get anything answered before they begin the actual writing process. So the second step is outlining. We provide students with a default flexible outline. Students can modify this. They can add body paragraphs, remove body paragraphs, add evidence, add explanations, add reasoning, add sources, whatever they need, but we do have a default 3-paragraph essay outline. It also comes with rough kind of exemplar sentences for each section, so students can kind of see an example of what an in-text citation looks like or a thesis statement that's related to the type of essay that you specified. During this stage, the student, again, can chat with khanmigo. The student can start by just saying, I'm stuck, or they can just dive right in. They don't have to engage with khanmigo at all if they don't want to. And one of the nice things about Writing Coach is even if they don't chat with khanmigo at all, khanmigo will still check their work. So once they move from outlining to drafting, without even being asked, khanmigo is going to be like, I'm just gonna make sure that your outline is matching what the instructions are. Because again, khanmigo can see the teacher's assignment instructions at every stage. So once the student tries to move on to drafting, khanmigo performs an initial check to make sure that the thesis is actually answering the question that is being asked in the assignment instructions. It's checking to make sure the main points have something to do with the thesis. This is not the part where it's going to be like giving a ton of feedback. It's just doing basic alignment checks here and completion checks. It's checking to make sure the evidence is related to the points they're making, that the evidence meets the assignment expectations. So again, if you said, I need 3 pieces of textual evidence, and the student provided 1 piece of textual evidence, a random example from their life, and nothing else, then it's going to say, hold up, that's not what your teacher asked for, and it's going to give them a chance to go back and fix it before they move on. It's also going to just check to make sure they didn't put, one paragraph before another that didn't make any sense. So it's looking for, logical reasoning here. And if you say they need a counter argument and a rebuttal and any of those kind of core elements of an argumentative essay, and the student didn't include that, it's going to point that out too. So this is one of those kind of checks that we do to make sure that the student is on the right track. When we get to drafting, we have, this is an example of how khanmigo is maybe less helpful than ChatGPT in some ways. So here the student has access to the outline that they just made with khanmigo. So if you see the tabs here at the bottom, their assignment instructions are always at the bottom. They can always chat with khanmigo, and when they're drafting, they can get to their outline. So when they're using their outline, we let them copy and paste right from their outline into their draft. They can keep drafting. At any point, they can talk to khanmigo about, am I doing this right? Or what comes next? Or I'm stuck, or I don't know what to put. But obviously, if the student is asking khanmigo to do any of the writing for them, to suggest evidence, to write a hook, to write a conclusion, khanmigo will not do that. And you will see this later, but you also, as the teacher, will have full visibility into all of these interactions. And students, we tell students that too, so it's not a surprise for them. They know that this chat is entirely viewable to the teacher. So once the student has a first draft, they can then submit it for feedback. Once they submit it for feedback, what we do is we generate suggestions in these 5 categories up here: introduction, evidence and reasoning, structure and organization, conclusion, and style and tone. And again, these are each meticulously crafted to make sure that the feedback is grade level appropriate, because again, we know what grade level you put in for the students. We know what the assignment instructions were. If you said, make sure there's MLA citations and make sure that there's this or that, it's going to put that feedback under these categories. And these categories might be different from the rubrics that you're used to working with, but all of the feedback that you would get, for example, on the New Hampshire SAS test would still be reflected in these categories. So introduction will contain feedback on things like statement of purpose. Evidence and reasoning will have things like evidence and elaboration. Structure and conclusion will contain feedback related to focus and organization. And style and tone will contain conventions and editing feedback. And for SAT, that feedback also will be reflected across those different categories. One thing to note about reading with SAT, once again, if you don't either include the short passage itself in the essay prompt and instructions, or that the prompt is or the essay itself is too long, or the reading passage rather is too long, or it's kind of a not super well-known passage, it might struggle with the reading feedback part for SAT because it doesn't know what the heck this story or passage is that you're talking about. So if you have an example of a passage that's short enough to include in the prompt or is well known enough to just be referenced in the prompt, then it will give feedback related to your analysis of the reading. A couple of other things to point out in our feedback interface. For every piece of feedback, including even positive praise, which you don't always get, not every kid gets positive praise in every category, but if they do something well, we try to point that out. But for any feedback that's critical or actionable, what we noticed when we first launched this version of the product is that many students didn't really know what to do next. They saw the feedback and they were like, okay, now what? And we let them chat with khanmigo about it, but they didn't know how to chat with khanmigo about it. So we added these different examples of how you can talk to khanmigo about the feedback that you're getting. So some of the things that we let students do, and they can ask any question they want as long as it's related to improving their essay, but we let them ask for an example from another essay prompt. So if the feedback is related to adding more context in your introduction, then it'll give an example of an essay on a completely different topic where it kind of shows them what it means by giving more context to the reader in the introduction. We let them ask a follow-up question to explain the suggestion. So if the student just doesn't really get what it's saying, they can click explain suggestion and it'll reword it for them, or the student can say, break it down for me even more, or be more specific, and it'll respond to that. And then the other thing that it does, which I think is probably the most useful, is the student can actually edit their essay in that box. So they can go back at any point and they can change the sentence, they can erase, they can revise, they can edit anything they want, and then they can say, check my revision. And khanmigo will reference the feedback that the student is talking about, and it will look at the essay before and after the student asked it to check their revision. And it will actually reassess, did they fix it? Like, did they actually add enough context now that it makes sense to the reader what they're talking about? And khanmigo will kind of give them a thumbs up, or it's not quite there yet, and help them work through that. So anytime a student is uncertain about, is that better, did it fix it, that's a really useful tool to have them do the revision live in this interface and then ask khanmigo if they fixed it. And as they're making the revisions and edits, they can mark each different piece of feedback as resolved. Once they're done revising, they can export their essay to PDF or Microsoft Word or Google Drive. If you all use any of those kind of platforms, and you want to do your grading there of their final draft or whatever, those are some methods where you can have their students kind of export their final drafts to those places. But at the same time, you will also have access to the final draft directly in writingcoach in your kind of teacher dashboard. So this is what the teacher experience looks like. For every writingcoach assignment that a teacher creates, there is a class assignment report. The class assignment report includes the information about the assignment that you added, so you can expand it to view the essay instructions that you wrote. But then this is where you can see for all of the students in your class where in the writing process they are. So if students haven't started yet, or maybe they're still chatting with khanmigo and understanding, or if they're outlining, if they're actively drafting, or if they are revising, or if they've marked it as complete, you can see it from this dashboard to get a sense of the progress that they're being, the progress that's being made. We also have flags to let you know if somebody submitted something by the due date, but then edited it after the due date passed. So you can go in and kind of see what exactly they did after the due date passed. And obviously, if they didn't submit it by the due date, we'll also flag that as past due. Other things you can see from this dashboard, how much time students spent. This is active time. This isn't just like they had their browser open and they went to sleep. Like, this is actively scrolling on the page or talking to khanmigo or writing or revising or any of the things that you could be doing on the page. So that's the active time that they spent. And what we typically find with writingcoach for the partners who have been using it so far is that the average time spent is about 2 hours for one essay. And that includes everything from understanding all the way to completed. The column under writing feedback, that's where you can see the number of suggestions khanmigo gave. So, if they got 20 suggestions versus like 5, that'll tell you a little bit about how good their first draft was. And you can also see how much of that feedback they have resolved, if they've resolved any of it. So if they've submitted it, but they didn't resolve any feedback, maybe they just didn't click the button, but maybe they didn't actually make any revisions, I would click in there and see exactly what happened. Word count is another piece of data that you have here. And then the originality flags, these are where khanmigo will tell you if the student pasted something that wasn't from their outline into their draft or into their revised draft. So if they're pasting from their outline, that's fine. If they're pasting into their outline evidence, that's fine. If they're pasting, more than a couple of words into their main points or their thesis or their evidence elaboration not evidence, but their reasoning and elaboration of their outline. That'll get flagged. And if they're pasting, I think, more than 5 or 10 words, I forget exactly, into their draft or in their revisions, that's also going to raise a flag for you. And of course, this is not foolproof, right? Students might reasonably be pasting in a new piece of evidence that they found. Maybe khanmigo gave them feedback during revising that their evidence wasn't that great, so they went and found a new piece. You then can go in and check to see, is this a real issue, or was this flagged because they pasted in new evidence or something like that? And of course, students will always have their ways, but we do think that this helps with a lot of the transparency, and from what we've seen, it has caught a lot of students. So this is what it looks like if you go into what we call the individual student essay report. So this is when you click on one of those students or you click on one of those originality flags, you get the entire student writing process. So you can see everything from every single chat that they had with khanmigo from the very beginning. You can see their entire outlining history. You can see their chats while they were outlining. You can see their draft history, their chats while they were drafting. You can see the first draft that they submitted for khanmigo for feedback. You can see the feedback that khanmigo gave. You can see when they chatted with khanmigo about the feedback. You can see the revisions that they made. You can see if they edited after the due date passed. You can see what the essay looked like when the due date passed. So we provide a lot of transparency into the writing process here. We do not expect every teacher to dig in and look at all of this data for every kid. That would increase the amount of work that we'd be expecting teachers to do. But this is here for when you need it. So the reason why this page is so important is this page kind of tells you where to drill down. So again, if you have students who wrote an essay from start to finish in 30 minutes, maybe we check on that kid. If you have a student who got 20 pieces of feedback and resolved none of it, maybe drill down into that one. Anytime you see an originality flag, that would be a good reason to drill down. So there's a lot of data here, but the intent is to make it easier to figure out who should we really look at, who should we drill down into, and in cases where you do have to investigate potential issues of plagiarism, there's a lot of information here that can help you understand what exactly happened in the whole process. All right. Oh, and real quick, for those of you who are school or district administrators, there is also some Writing Coach related data that you can find in the KAD admin dashboard. So any time that students spend working on Writing Coach, that active time spent that you saw, that gets reflected in Learning Minutes. And actual student engagement with Writing Coach would be reflected as an activity under the khanmigo usage section. So you can get a sense of the number of students using khanmigo Writing Coach, or the percentage of students who are using khanmigo Writing Coach, and drill that down into different schools or whatever you're looking at. So I'm gonna actually switch, because I have a couple of minutes. I'm gonna switch over to the live experience, because next I'm gonna give you all a chance to log into your accounts and play around with this. So again, when you're logged into your Khan Academy account, you want to click on the khanmigo dropdown and go to Learner Activities, which is this page. It'll land you, I'll just show you. Okay, when you click on Learner Activities, it'll take you here. You're going to scroll down on the left-hand side menu here and click on Writing Coach. And again, your students can do this as well. Students can't assign, and they have a different button here. They can actually use Writing Coach on their own if they just want extra help with an essay. You don't need to assign it to them, but if you assign it to them, then you get that class report and all of those useful insights. So you'll see 3 tabs here. The 2 most important tabs are your assignments that you've created for your classes and your essays. Your essays is kind of like your playground for Writing Coach. So if you wanted to model how to use Writing Coach in a classroom, you can create your own essay, and that will show up under My Essays. So if you click Try Student Experience, that's going to create an essay under your essays. Okay, so if you wanted to demo for students how to use this, you could use that tool to kind of show them and work through it together. But your assignments will show up under the My Assignments tab. one of the things that I would encourage you all to explore once I let you go off and try this out, we have 2 different sample essays under my essays. So when you log in, obviously writing an essay takes a long time. So even if you are experimenting with Writing Coach or just trying it out, we don't want you to have to actually outline and write an entire essay just to see how it works. So these sample essays have pre-filled in outlines and drafts so that you can just see what it looks like. So if I go into, let's see, daylight savings time persuasive essay, I'm going to go back to the beginning. This is the student preview. This is not a real essay, but you can see that there's the essay instructions over here, and then khanmigo over here. You can chat with it. You can move on to outlining, and it's already pre-filled in with some outlining. I would recommend that you play around with deleting stuff or making totally weird random evidence like that has nothing to do with the assignment and talk to khanmigo and see what happens. You can try out, asking it general questions about what to do next. If you leave a bunch of things blank and see how it responds there. When you get into drafting, you can see that it's going to do the check. And I haven't deleted anything, so hopefully all these boxes, it still thinks, okay, so there are suggestions with the default. So this is what it looks like if you do not meet those basic expectations. It will give you the examples of what you need to fix. And technically, if you're like, I disagree, you can ignore and move on. Or you can go back down here and you can revise your outline. I'm going to just ignore and move on to show you the drafting experience. Again, we've pre-filled in a draft here for you. When a student starts on this page, it's going to be blank. But just to show you, this is the outline on this side. So if the student is pasting from their outline, they're just going to click copy for whatever section they want to paste in and paste it into their draft field. And again, down here, that's where they can switch to chat or just view the assignment instructions again. And when we move to revising, it's going to generate the feedback for you in real time. And you can see as it's generating the different pieces of feedback that you get. And again, you can interact with all of these chats. When you're done with the sample essay, if you want to just delete it and start over, you can press delete, and that's just going to erase the sample essay, and you can see a fresh new one down here at the bottom, and you can start over. So this is also really helpful if you're just showing students how to use Writing Coach, so you don't have to actually type in maybe all of the outlines or the drafts. This is kind of a quick way to try out Writing Coach. So you can play around with that. You can also play around with actually creating a Writing Coach assignment if your Khan Academy account has classes, just to see what that looks like. Or you can create your own essay that has a prompt of your choice. So those are some of the different ways that you can do that. I will also, as you guys are doing that, I will leave up one of those sample teacher reports up here. So if you are curious and you want to take a closer look at what that looks like, I can kind of show you what that looks like too. All right, are there any questions? Let me go back to the deck. About, yes.
So if the student, ignores, submits, is there a function in there for the teacher to kick it right back? Try again, my friend.
That's a great question. As long as the due date hasn't passed, they can go right back. They can go back and do it again.
Okay, but is there a specific, the teacher can send it back or the kid can just go in?
The kid can go in and actually, so they can go back if they haven't. The only difference, okay, let me think about this. They can go back at any point and they can modify their outline, their draft, or their revised draft at any point if the due date hasn't passed. If they have already generated feedback on their first draft, khanmigo can't generate feedback again on that same assignment. They only get one chance to generate feedback. But what you can do is have them do it with start your own essay and have them do it again there. It's not gonna be part of the assignment. That's one of the things that we've heard a few people be like, that would be really nice if I could just be start over.
You would like to encourage them to, let's improve upon what we've got.
Yes.
I'm gonna send this back to you right now. This is what it's going in as, but we're gonna keep working on this.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I would have a due date.
Yeah.
And yes, that was the due date, but as a middle school teacher especially.
Yes.
That doesn't mean I'm done working with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to give you an opportunity to review and improve and continue to learn and grow. And so
Agree.
I want them to be able to edit.
I think
I've
actually
seen it.
I'm wrong about you can't. That's why we added the edited after due date. You can edit after the due date. We just tell the teacher when they did that.
It would really
Yeah.
be nice to have a function that the teacher has sent it back.
Yes.
Because a lot of
I agree.
times otherwise the kids are gonna be like, whatever, I submitted.
Yeah, I agree. And actually later on, after we do all of this, Bernadette and Barbara are going to put up chart paper where you're all going to share all of your feedback, all of your ideas. We want to hear from you. How can we make this better? What's missing? What are some of the things that would make this more useful for all of you? So save those nuggets and please add them to the chart paper when we get to that. Yes.
If I'm a teacher and I create an assignment and I put all my stuff in and then I assign it to my kids and then let's call it a week later while they're working on it, I recognize that I forgot to add something. I go back and I add, it should have been APA, not MLA.
Yeah.
Will the feedback for the students that have already in the outlining and drafting, will the feedback then adjust?
No, not yet.
Okay.
But we're working on that.
Okay.
Yes.
So is the feedback only for writing style, structure, elaboration, or does it also take into account the content?
It does take into account the content, but only if the student is writing about literature or a reading passage, and the reading passage isn't super well known. It might struggle to, like, the student could technically make up, an article or something. There's no way for the LLM to know that that's a made-up article.
Because that's
Yeah.
what I'm noticing, that I need to score for the content.
Yes.
As opposed, but it's giving me structure, but not the content.
Yeah, if you're assigning an essay about Lord of the Flies or any kind
Well,
of
if we're doing the
well-known
Revolutionary
book.
War or,
Yes, exactly.
or an experiment in science.
Exactly. If you're referencing well-known things, it will give feedback on content. It'll say, that's the wrong character. It might point out like issues with that. But it has to be kind of a well-known or commonly known passage. Or again, if it's a short passage, you can just put the whole passage in the assignment instructions for the AI to have as a reference. Yep.
I have two short questions. First, when it exports it to Google Drive, do they have to go in and reformat it to look like an MLA essay, double spacing, time zero, all that kind of stuff?
They probably will have to do some reformatting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So my other question is, where do you see peer review kind of fitting in to this? Like, let's say they're doing their first draft via this, they're getting legit feedback. Would you then say, after you've gotten Khanmigo feedback, still give it to a partner, or would you say do that before? Yeah.
I would do that. Yeah, I would have them export to Google Drive, and then share it with a partner, and have that partner kind of annotate it with Google Doc comments. And then, you could also have them. One of the things that we don't do yet, but we want to do, is allow you to submit a draft for feedback again.
Yeah.
So what we're actually planning on doing this year is letting you just do the feedback part. So if you just want students to put a draft in and you don't really care about the whole writing process being documented in Writing Coach and getting that support, you just want them to get a round of feedback on a draft, they will be able to do that. So you could have them do that after they did one round with Writing Coach and then Google Docs with a peer or something
If they're getting
after.
conflicting comments from their partner versus
Yeah.
what they got from Khanmigo,
Yeah.
would you say it's then on the student to decide what is appropriate feedback to take?
I
Or
think
who to
so.
trust?
You could also go to Tutor Me Humanities, which is another Khanmigo activity, and have the student ask
Sure.
Khanmigo what they think. But yeah, I think that's a good higher order skill for the kid, is just to figure out, should I trust Khanmigo's feedback or my peers' feedback, or maybe that's a time to just ask the teacher.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. All right. So I'm going to leave these directions up here for you all. And we have until 11:30, I believe. Yep. We have until 11:30 for you all to try out these different things. Log into your Khan Academy account, play around, create assignments, create essays, play with the sample essays. Go ahead, and we'll tell you when the 15 minutes is up.
Just trying to put in what a student response would be, and then what is some of that feedback that comes back. And literally, it came up with, I think, 16 different kind of prompts and things to resolve. And as a student, we had to go through, and we were kind of doing this work together, put it in a sample piece of writing, looking at all those suggestions, and then you have to go through and like do the work. It's not doing any of the work for you. It continues to come back and say, you can have an example, here's an example of what we're talking about, do it yourself. So I think teachers can be confident that it's student work in the end. And that's what we want to know, is that students, they're learning the process, there's modeling there, there's examples and exemplars there, but in the end, it comes back to it's got to be that student's work, which I think is a piece that a lot of teachers are going to have reluctance with, but our first kind of kick of the tires and testing was that this is good. This is going to be really great for teachers and for students. I love the ability for that instant feedback. Teachers are very excited that students have the ability to get that feedback on their writing, their topic, their level, their struggles, whatever it is, instantaneously. One of our teachers said, oh my gosh, this feedback would take me days to give back to students. They're getting it instantaneously. It is critical. And that's something we as teachers never have enough time for. And it's feedback, the most important piece is as fast as you can get it back to students. Accurate, yes, and you know, personalized but timely is that one critical factor, and Writing Coach is as timely as you can possibly get. It's almost instantaneous, so that's exciting. I really want to support teachers in adopting those smart AI tools that helps make teaching better, makes it better for student learning. At the end, it's all about student learning, and this is an example of AI where really the focus is all on student learning. I see very few downsides to this, AI deployed in this way. It's not just send them to ChatGPT and say go for it and hope for the best. This is very structured, it's within Khan. We have oversight, teachers can see the whole process and guide that whole process and see what students are getting back from that. So if any teachers are kind of on that fence, whether, you know, how's AI going to help, this is a tool that they should be trying.
It makes me feel better knowing that I'm giving them a tool as opposed to something that'll help them cheat or just think for them. So it definitely helps them guide their thinking, and a source that you can trust, that's reliable, that's going to give them good quality information instead of just a bot auto-populating answers. It'll free up a lot of time for teachers to meet with the students who really need their help, and they can gauge which ones are grasping the concepts more easily and spend more time on that rather than checking all of the papers, all the steps.
The Writing Coach is an extremely powerful tool that will help students and teachers begin the process of writing, not only in the feedback process, but 20 years in the classroom, one of the most common questions I get from students is, how do I start this? And the writing tool for Khan Academy really takes them through that process of how to start it. And if they have that question, how do I start this? The fields are there, Khanmigo is there to help them brainstorm, begin that process. The assignment is there, so it's all in one place, which I absolutely love. Plus it's probably in whatever learning system that they have, like Google Classroom. So I think that is super, super helpful for teachers and students alike. One-on-one, because there is feedback being given, it gives the teacher some time to have more directed one-on-one time into the deeper elements of the paper, as opposed to more superficial stuff like format or paragraphs or those things.